Hey 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez and you are listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. This is Q&A session 10 and it is our 110th episode. As usual, since we are at another 10 episode mark, this show will be the end of season 11 and the beginning of our usual month-long break from podcasting. Thank you all so much for listening to us for so long. We can't tell you how much we love doing what we do, and we couldn't do it without you guys tuning in and leaving us reviews and sharing our stuff all over social media, so please know that we sincerely appreciate it. Hopefully, this amazing Q&A with Eric Helms and Alberto Nunez will tide you over while we're gone. This entire show features questions mainly from our website. You can ask us stuff there anytime at 3dmusclejourney.com/QA. And if you're already signed up for our monthly newsletter, you've probably already noticed that there's a giant button at the bottom of every email that directs you to that online form as well. So you should probably sign up for that at our website as well if you haven't already, because then you can ask us questions anytime and they'll probably be on this show. So anyways, let me tell you what today is all about. Topics for this show, episode 110, will include anger during training sessions, the management of lifting leverages when gaining or losing body weight, how to integrate your training into a busy work life or physically demanding job, the cause of novice strength gains and how much nutrition can affect them, how to tell if you're fatigued, beat up, in need of more volume, or truly plateaued, and what it means to lose momentum in a gaining phase, and a whole lot more stuff. Also, you might hear Alberto do his Elmo impression somewhere in this episode, a time or two. Maybe. You might want to stick around for that. So this episode is full of info, and we really hope you love it since it's the last one of the season. Like I mentioned earlier, we'll be taking 4 weeks off of publishing the show to do our usual little deload period before returning with episode 111 at the end of November. In the meantime, if you have any feedback or comments on this particular episode, go to 3dmusclejourney.com or to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/team3dmj and leave it under podcast 110. Let's get into it. Here is Q&A session 10 with Alberto Nunez and Eric Helms. Question number 1. All right. This is from Anakin. Not a joke. Didn't make that name up. It's from the website intake form.
Anakin, control your anger.
How did you know? You're not supposed to tell them. Okay, we already went over this.
No, Anakin Skywalker.
Oh, you didn't know the question. Okay, let me read the question for you.
Oh, wow.
Let me read the question for you. Okay. Hey guys, you're the best experts. That's nice. Thank you. I'm experiencing exercise-induced anger during intensive sessions, getting a huge rage, and it keeps me going through, and I'm not sure if that's normal or healthy or why it's happening. Didn't find any related research on this topic. Maybe you could cover it in a podcast or something. Thanks. Are you being for real that you were thinking of it, Skywalker?
So this may be a very, very impressive troll, which I just want to acknowledge that possibility and give some major props. If this is, and you made it on the podcast, well done. Because Anakin Skywalker is who becomes Darth Vader, and great anger is sensed in him, and that then drives him to become Darth Vader. So if this is just a massive troll to get us to answer your question, high five, and we're actually going to answer it. So, yeah.
Wow.
So the question is I'm angry during my training, and it's obviously becoming a problem, or you wouldn't ask us about it. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, I think.
That's it.
Yeah, I kind of relate because in 2009, I was prepping, and there was a point where I was like listening to Rage Against the Machine or System of a Down, like for the 30-minute drive all the way to the gym, and then I was just like, I was rage fueled for most of my 2009 prep. A lot of that had to do with what's going on in my personal life, but I do think that's not always a positive fuel for training. I think that can make you more irritable and lose touch with some of the aspects of just pure joy that probably brought you to weightlifting at some point. So I think maybe just try to listen to something that's very like different music and get in a different headspace. Like don't watch bodybuilding motivation videos of, people yelling diesel at giant jacked people from the UK before training. don't listen to metal. Try listening to something like, Earth, Wind, and Fire. That'd be my advice.
Wow, yeah,
Yeah.
good recommendation.
A little funk. Dance between sets to something funky. It's hard to be mad when you're dancing, tell you what.
That is true. But not all of us are as blessed in that area as you are, Holmes.
Hey, everyone should dance regardless of their natural talent, in my opinion.
Okay.
I mean, don't try to battle, or you might get
You
messed
might
up.
get mad, and you get mad because you lost.
Yeah, because that's what happens. But if it's just for pleasure, it's all good.
Yeah, and I think it's, like you said, it's the only problem I feel like outside of the gym. I find it quite useful to be angry sometimes when I'm lifting, which...
But 24/7,
I think
every time you
It
train?
doesn't say
selective
that, though.
training sessions.
He says it gets me
But
through
all
my
the time,
training.
that would be exhausting. That would be exhausting. I know one person that can do that all the time. You guys know who I'm talking about?
No idea. You have absolutely no clue who's mad every time they train.
He's got his dance is the mad stomp. That's how he dances when he trains.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
No,
true.
Leighton Norton. That's how he does it. Outside of him, like, hey, I just came back from USAPL Nationals, and most everyone, like, when they're lifting and competing, they're a little pissed off. Like, that's kind of where they go. But training, that would be. I feel like that would wear someone out at a certain point.
What's his name? Carl from JPS's powerlifting.
Oh,
guy.
yeah.
He gets all crazy,
Carl
too.
Draga.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't know if
But
this
see,
makes
these people
sense or
don't question it, though. These people
Yeah.
just do it. Whereas, like, if you're like this is like, I don't feel all the way comfortable with it, then it might not be your thing. It might be something worth sorting out.
Yeah. More in like your ability to come in and out of it, right? Like it's like Carl, for example, because we've been there lifting with him. Like he gets all crazy and he does his lift, but then he backs away for 5 minutes or whatever, and he's a normal dude. And then he gets into it again, and then so it's like as long as you can control it, maybe work on that.
Between go there and be there, right? You don't want to be there, but you want to be able to go there.
Yes. Not with a TH, always with a T.
D-E-R.
Hey, that's a T-shirt. When we start to pump out our own T-shirts, that's a T-shirt.
That is a good one. What was I going to say? Oh, is it also like a perception thing too? Like I think angry, like I don't think to myself when I just said anger seems useful to me. I think hyped up and angry like aren't always the same for me. I'm not mad. I'm just like, ready.
I get, it's different. It's like intensity versus anger is how I would describe it. Because I get third pole at meets. I normally sequester myself off and pace around a little bit and might yell or something. But normally I'm a pretty focused, calm lifter.
Yeah.
See, when you're angry, you're focused, right? That's one of the emotions that I think comes along with it. And maybe you could just be focused and not be angry.
Well,
yeah,
that's the thing is like, is it actual anger though if it's not directed at something? Would it just be like excited, like the literal turn of excited?
I don't know.
Sorry, we're going on.
The questioner is presenting it as anger. So
it's true. Okay. So Anakin, we're not totally sure if this is a because he says I'm not sure if that's normal, healthy. If it doesn't feel good, I don't know.
Well, if in a couple years you kill an entire village and then come out of lava as a cyborg that's trying to take over the galaxy, then it was too much anger. That's how you know. So.
Yeah. If you start talking like James Earl Jones.
Yes.
Then
it's worth it. Because that's awesome.
Then you get a job as a narrator in jail.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then you fight for contracts with Morgan Freeman. Yeah.
See, but all athletes look a little different when they're like ready to go.
Yeah.
And if your focus looks a little different from other people, you shouldn't necessarily feel bad about that, especially if it seems to be working and it's not exhausting you.
That's a good point. If it seems normal for you, but you're just comparing yourself to the other people you see at the gym who maybe aren't going there. Okay. Yeah. I hope that was useful. I think it was. All right, next one. From Patricia. Oh, just kidding. Patria. There's no C. Patria. Patria. I don't know.
Like
Patria Jimenez? I don't know.
Patria. Oh, it
Ooh,
is
you said
patria.
that fancy. Do it again, Bert.
Patria. That's novella style right there.
Hey, no. Oh, y'all see Bucky? Oh, y'all don't know about Bucky yet. We haven't taken y'all there. It's my new popper.
You got one of
Okay.
them.
One of them.
The gas station, Buc-ee's.
Yes. If you're from Texas, you know. If you're from Texas,
I
you
learned
know.
about Buc-ee's from Ellis McLean on
There you
Omar
go.
Issa's podcast.
It's crazy. He probably told you needed some beaver nuggets, right?
Well, he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to Omar and Silent Mike. But yeah, he talked all about Buc-ee's. So.
Okay. We'll get y'all some beaver nuggets next time y'all come. If they haven't been to Texas, it sounds real bad. Or real interesting, depending. Okay. Patria says, in summary, right, it's quite a lot of context, but basically, are leverages really always better at a higher body weight? Because that seems to be how we typically present it on the podcast, right? We usually say when you're prepping, when you're dieting, you are a smaller human. It gets harder to lift because of a lot of reasons, but one of those being that your leverages aren't as conducive to lifting heavy loads. Is that true? And is it always that way? Who wants to start?
I will say that most of the time when someone just kind of throws out leverages changing, they don't always mean leverages. It's kind of a bigger catch-all phrase that has to do with just body dimensions and how you feel in your body after your body weight has changed and more important, I think your body dimensions have changed.
Right. So like your femur didn't grow or shrink?
Typically not.
Okay.
You know, that's a pretty extreme diet. I lost so much bone mass, my femurs are actually showing. That's a
But
problem.
what do you mean by body dimensions? Like fat pockets? Like we're
Yeah.
like,
So
yep.
when body fat goes down and you feel like I feel less bounce out of the hole or bounce out of the hole at a different point in the squat when I am, let's say, 225 pounds versus 190 pounds. And I would say in some ways it improves when you get heavier, but not always. So for example, the heaviest deadlift that's been pulled in the IPF was done in the 105 class, not the 120, not the super heavy class. And that's because you have to figure out some way to get around yourself to pull. It also has to do with you being taller. But I would say that for the most part, the super heavies aren't taller than the 120s. And sometimes the 105s, they are just a bit more rotund, if you will, yes. Solid, sturdy, thick with two C's. So yeah, I think definitely bench and squat typically go up with weight gain. But deadlift is not always, especially if you're getting real big for you.
Can you explain why bench?
Yeah, for a couple reasons. One, the reason we arch is to reduce the range of motion so that it is easier to move heavier loads. There's less distance.
One of the reasons.
And one of the reasons. And how much you can arch is dependent on how well you can keep your butt on the bench. So when you have a bigger butt, you can get more arch without your butt coming off the bench. So the bigger your butt from weight gain, the bigger the decline, which means lower the range of motion and more pec involvement,
and
which means heavier loads.
Fluffier your chest is closer to the bar too.
Yeah, you're gaining a few millimeters of pec fat as well, which and especially in a woman's case, might give you even more range of motion, or even less range of motion, I should say.
Okay, so other than the deadlift having to get around your thick with two C-ness in the middle, what? How else can you think of other situations where being less heavy would help you with lifting?
Yeah, Bert, anything you think of?
Well, I think with the squat and bench press, one, because there's just more room for error because there's more of you under the bar. Like with the deadlift, the bar is never really on you. So if you have a body that's shrinking, especially as you're going through your shrinking phase, like it's like every 2 weeks or so, you're having to readjust and balance it in a slightly different way. And then also just weight moves weight, you know? So I think that's That's a big one. Yeah. So those two I would have to
Well,
look.
and if
Presses and
you're,
squats.
man, I feel like she said she was a power lifter.
Actually, that's a good point Berto brought up, is that regardless of whether you gain or lose weight, you feel different, and there's probably going to be subtle differences in the neuromuscular patterning of what the squat is going to be. So that means people who diet a lot of weight off in the final week or day before they get on the platform, they are probably having to adjust to that a little bit. However, someone who has relatively weight stable into their meat is going to have a few less changes that they have to deal with. So that's probably
Yeah. So it might
negative
just,
whether you're gaining or losing.
yeah. So if you gain weight, not even super abruptly, but if you've been the same weight for a long time and then you gain, shit might feel worse just because it's a change.
Indeed.
Right, is what you're saying. Okay. And she's a power lifter, so that was a lot of around her 1RMs. But I was going to say, like, for a bodybuilder, maybe like your endurance might be better if you're not. So,
Yeah, you'll get more reps at lower percentages of 1RM.
yeah. Okay.
Like I can do more reps at 70% of 1RM when I'm lighter than heavier.
Okay. All right.
Even though that 1RM might be lower, but
Percentage-wise, yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, same relative. Yeah. Yep.
So it just depends what you're basing it off of, also.
Indeed.
Question number 3 from Loti or Lodi, Loti. How would you say that?
I think it's Lodi because there's a
Lodi,
city
ARIM.
called Lodi.
Oh yeah, outside of San.
Lodi is Lodi.
DI.
Oh, okay. Oh, Lodi.
Okay, LOTI. Her question, or I don't know. Okay.
You don't know the sex of the person.
The gender.
I don't know the gender or the sex.
This is a good point, just because the name's not so telling. But I feel like it said it in the where I pulled it from. I just didn't get that part. Okay. Hi, 3DMJ. To give background, I'm 119 pounds. I've been lifting for just about 1 year. I'm in a low healthy body fat percentage, female, because 16 to 19-ish. Currently maintaining body weight. My main goals are improving strength performance. I've been enjoying training the big 3 and have beginner numbers. I've tracked my food regularly for about 8 to 12 months and have recently stopped. I was wondering if you think it is ever appropriate for a non-competitive athlete or enthusiastic gym goer to continuously track food on a daily basis. I would say tracking is beneficial for most people, excluding those with a previous history of having an eating disorder, and is appropriate for short periods of time, but I was wondering if you think it's overkill to track for an extended period of time. Thanks.
So this could turn into 3 hours, but I have much to say.
Let's hear all the muches.
Okay. I actually think that, and this has evolved, that tracking should probably be something avoided if possible, unless you have competitive goals.
Okay.
So like if I was to go back in time and be a personal trainer again, the first step I would do with a client would be nutrition education. So how to read a food label, understanding the concept of energy balance, know which foods have different macronutrients, and be able to understand ideal choices. But I would not be like, now let's get you a MyFitnessPal account, let's get you a scale, let's track and weigh and look at the relationship. The next step would be something around creating structure and mindfulness, so they know when they're unconsciously eating, when they're eating based on convenience or social reasons, what are the common logistical barriers that result in behaviors that are not helping them get to where they want to be. Like, oh, I'm always on the go at X, Y, and Z days, or we do family dinners on these X, Y days, et cetera, blah, 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 or we have these in the house. So it'd be mindfulness, awareness, logistical changes. And then I would teach them about structure. So, each one of our meals are going to have protein and a vegetable serving in them. We're not going to eat between meals. And we're going to have these drinks instead of these drinks, which might be lower in calories. And only if all that stuff did not work would I actually have them track, and it would be purposefully to help them really get a better handle on those previous aspects, awareness, controlling those things a little bit better. And it would be for a time restricted period, probably no more than a month or 2. And then we would try to take that away to see if they could make more permanent changes. In fact, the only time I would advise tracking continuously is for people who have to push below a body fat level that would be where their hunger and satiety signals would be all jacked up, where they can't get there by more intuitive means, because their intuition would take them back to a healthier body fat percentage. So competitors. And I think competitors should probably restrict the amount of time that they spend tracking, especially once they establish that really finely tuned awareness of, what their energy intake is and whether it's enough to gain weight, et cetera, and whether they have adequate protein and fuel for training. So I really think that tracking and weighing, it has pros and cons. I think we have good data now to show that it can induce disordered eating and create problems for people. So it should be something we use a little more cautiously, which is something in the past I would have recommended everyone track for a while. But I do think it can be useful temporarily to get a good idea of portion control. But I think you can also do things like, instead of having a continuous and ongoing quantified understanding of portion control through tracking and looking at your logs, I think you can understand what are appropriate portions of meals off things like, a deck of cards for something, or a fist-sized portion for something, and then only make those decisions for a restricted point instead of continuously. So I'm going to eat, and I'm going to have a fist of rice and a deck of cards of chicken, and then unlimited broccoli, but I'm not going to write that down or track it, et cetera. And that still teaches you portion control and reasonable limits without requiring you to, get on the food scale and body weight scale and all that stuff. And I think you can assess things more qualitatively as far as fat loss and body weight and how your clothes are fitting like that as well. And only if you are like a weight class restricted strength athlete do you really need to get on the scale all the time.
That was a good summary, Helms.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
A lot of people who just bought a shirt that says "just track it" are gonna have to return it.
Damn.
Yeah. This is something I've actually been thinking a lot about lately, and I'm probably going to write some stuff, even some peer-reviewed stuff on this lately.
Why have you been thinking about it so much lately?
Because there's actually been a fair amount of research coming out of the intuitive eating research camp. A lot of it I don't think is very good, and I disagree with it, but there's still some really good points. There are some who are completely against the idea of tracking and weighing, and I think that's probably not nuanced enough. And there's the more extreme aspects of healthy at every weight don't acknowledge that I do think, independent of the behaviors that lead to someone being obese, I think obesity in and of itself, we have pretty strong data, is unhealthy. So I do think you can use a weight neutral approach to improve someone's health at any weight, but they still might be, in an absolute sense, unhealthy because their BMI is, 36 or something like that.
Yeah.
And that if the intervention doesn't result in a loss of body mass at some point, that it's probably not successful, regardless of the fact that you are improving, say, their relationship with food, the relationship with their body image, and some other things like that. So anyway, basically, I'm trying to integrate all the stuff we've thought about with the recovery diet, flexible dieting, and the stuff you've always talked about, Andrea, with transitioning between off-season to competition season into some kind of paradigm, if you will, of this process that's a little more intentional, because we've kind of figured it out through trial and error.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
It's, I guess, also important to. Well, first off, thanks, Eric. That was really good. But I don't want people to think too that it's like, because they do this, as you know. Eric Helms said, "I'm not a competitor, so I shouldn't track. So I need to find all these other ways to not track, but to lose weight."
For sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's so, like you said, it's so nuanced and context dependent in who you are. Like, before I ever knew I wanted to compete, I started tracking because, as y'all know, that's kind of just my personality, and I track most things anyways. And if I don't know, if I want to learn it, I want to know it. And I remember back in the day when I was like, I want to look a little muscular. And I would go to like bodybuilding.com and they would be like, every meal you just need to have a carb, a protein, and a fat, the rule of thirds. And I would do that and like I would gain weight because like I would eat almonds every meal or I would add olive oil to shit I'd never eaten before, you know? And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. And I don't know what protein is, but the protein things that I was eating, like the servings were so much smaller than I prefer nowadays. And now that I've learned how much, you know, so, you know, I think another person, obviously this is like the extreme end because autistic would be like Ian McCarthy, but I know a lot of people in my life.
Shout out Ian.
I know, right? Shout out to Ian McCarthy. But like, he's my one person that's like, made me feel not so bad about tracking all the fucking time, but I shouldn't have been all the time. But again, there's a middle ground there. But I guess what I'm saying is like, there's different reasons that you would track, and there's different lifestyles that it would fall into, and there's different personalities that it easily falls into. But I think what you're saying, Eric, is most people it would stress out and induce negative behaviors.
You know, I'm sort of saying that, but I also think that so if in some of this research, there's correlations, which is not the same as causation, between weighing and tracking and eating disorders and poor mental health and body image issues. That's not to say that one is causing the other.
Right.
They could be, but we don't know which direction that causation is. It could be that people who are unhappy with their weight don't know how to manage it well and achieve a state of having poor body image and disordered eating and then start tracking. That's possible. It also could be possible that they come from a pretty healthy place of wanting to modify their body composition, start tracking, and that constant quantification pushes them towards disordered eating. Or it could be something totally different, like people who really gravitate towards tracking and weighing have some predispositions towards disordered eating. They're more interested in control. They're a little more OCD-like. Mm-hmm. And it could just be a covariate. So I think, I would even say that in different people in different scenarios, each one of those can be true, and that not one of them is the only answer. So I 100% agree with you that it depends on the person and the situation. And I also 100% agree with you that I'm not saying never track and that it's unhealthy or that it'll cause an eating disorder. I'm saying it should be your last port of call in the general population when after you've already gotten the education. So you could track, right? You are aware of what protein, carbs, and fats are, which foods have them, and of more qualitative descriptions of portion size. You understand energy balance, and you have gone through the process of identifying your own behaviors. You've created structure for your eating and some generalizable rules around what you do. If all that's in place and then you track, it's a lot different than just starting off with 3 numbers, which I think is the mistake of some in the If It Fits Your Macros community.
Yeah. Something that Bert's talked about, I'm speaking for Bert and he's right here. They talked about it a lot though.
Oh, hey Bert.
Hey. Is
hey, Bert.
when like when that was such a good Ernie.
I can do an Elmo that's really, really hot, but
it's hot.
There's no context for it here. Yeah.
Oh, God.
It bothers most people, let's be honest.
I cry. Okay. Fuck, what was I going to say?
I think you were asking Bert to do Elmo.
So Bert, how do we answer this problem without hearing an Elmo voice?
Oh, man. Well, the first 8 years of my bodybuilding, I didn't track a thing.
Hey, no. Don't dance around this. Don't dance around this. Let's hear it.
I have to clear my voice. I'm not ready for it.
Why don't you speak for him first, and then he'll speak for Elmo.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you said you mentioned Gen Pop, but in another podcast, Bert was saying we have to remember how big the spectrum of Gen Pop is, right? So if someone is not a competitor, but they submitted the question to us, or they're listening to this podcast, they're most likely in the state that I was when I started tracking, which is like, I'm really into this. I really want to figure this out. I've tried other ways and I want to get to like the heart of the matter, blah, 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 blah. Maybe, I don't know. But then there is like, of all the people listening to this who are probably coaches and trainers, a lot of the people that they work with would be very overwhelmed by it and kind of probably need the whole speech that you started with, Eric. You know, so like Gen Pop is just a really big, like there's non-competitors but living the life, like Bert says. And then there's like, I'm in my first year of training. I'm really excited. I just started reading stuff on bodybuilding.com. And then there's like a mom of 3 that just signed up with a personal trainer that I see 3 times a week and needs some guidance, you know?
Mm-hmm. True.
That was all. I was speaking for Bert and his range of Gen Pops while I wait for him to talk in his Elmo voice.
As Eric went through that list, I was like, that's kind of what I did when I started doing this. And I didn't
Eric,
track a
what is he
single number
doing?
until I was
Dodging.
8 years in. And to be honest, that was probably the most disrupted like my system was. Like I found out that I couldn't just wing a contest prep.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, I was like doing super well, and it was everything Eric mentioned. It's like, okay, so you know, when I go to the parties, like with the guys, like I'm going to like try to not drink at all, you know. And when we stop at the late night Wendy's or something, I'm gonna get the leanest high protein thing on the menu. And I got by really like pretty well with just that sort of system in play. First 8 years, like the idea of tracking something, I was like, for what? I'm doing exactly what I want, you know, most of the time. And it wasn't until my prep, and then the world became numbers to the point where for a good, man, like 4 months after that prep, I was like so screwed because like all the skills that I had learned just like vanished. So I did it the other way around. And if someone could start to a certain extent the way I did, and it was more or less in the order that Eric described. Like those were some peaceful times, and I was able to, especially if you are strength training, you're going to make some pretty good changes to your body comp, I feel.
And what's funny is we've all gone back to what he said. You know what I mean? Like, we've all done the crazy overly track and competed tons of times, and then we all go back to like, when I eat, there's 99% of the time a protein feeding, okay, and then there's usually not a whole lot of fat, and there's usually, you know,
I really think that
like we don't.
There should be a progression from, well, the common progression, if you don't stop at one of these points, which I think people often do, is from not tracking or paying attention at all to having some bodybuilder-esque lifestyle things, like I eat a lot of protein. And I think about eating enough. Like the typical dude is, I'm going to eat a lot and have a lot of protein, and I'm going to eat cleaner foods. And then the typical gal, not always, is I'm going to be a little tighter and pay more attention and have more protein.
Or I'm not going to eat anything.
Well,
like as little as possible while training.
But if they're in the bodybuilding realm, that also includes typically a high protein diet.
Yeah.
Then it progresses to, I'm going to track, or if it was maybe 5 years ago or more, I'm going to follow a strict meal plan. Mm-hmm. And then eventually you realize that's not sustainable and you move towards something a little more flexible. And then there's even problems with that. Like I tracked food for 5 years. Berto said he was screwed for 4 months. Like you lose your natural ability to actually gauge hunger and fullness. And then you move to something now where we are that is more of an intuitive eating kind of approach that's based a lot more on maintaining the habits from those earlier years, but now reincorporating things like satiety and hunger. And not necessarily just eating based on satiety and hunger, but knowing the appropriate levels of satiety and hunger for various goals. So like, for example, right now, I'm actually much leaner than I intended to get for my last mini cut. And all I've been doing is being careful and making sure that I am satisfied after meals, but not still hungry and not full, you know?
And
so
Bert has to be forever stuffed for his goals at the moment.
And I know that that's what I need. I know what my gaps are in my behavior. It's like, if I'm not careful, 5 hours can go by at this body weight and I haven't, I've eaten like 600 calories for the day. So, it goes back to, knowing yourself and what you're prone to. Overweight people, they tend to swear they eat nothing. And it's like, you have them track what they eat on a usual day and you're like, this is 25% more than you need at this body weight. And so I live in a college town. So a lot of the young men that I see in my gym, their goal is usually gaining weight. And with him, because when they eat whatever they want, they assume that they're doing everything they can to gain the weight that they want to. And it's like, no, it's kind of the same issues that I have. It's like, hey, no, you should probably have more frequent staple meals of some sort with protein in them.
Yeah.
So yeah, knowing yourself and knowing your situation, especially as a physique athlete, like right now I'm in my full house state. It really is just that. It's like, hey, if you're not doing something, go eat. And with Eric, it's more like, I got what I wanted last time I was at a restaurant. I think this time I'm going to get the salad.
Yeah.
And it's so basic and simple.
Well, that's what's hard, though. I know we're spending a lot of time on this, but it's such a big deal because it's almost easier to do what we've done. I say that it's like 10 years in the making, but almost easier than it is to get someone from never cared at all about my nutrition at all to the intuitive eating. Like, I don't know how you do that effectively without the middle part of being obsessed about it for a little bit in the middle, I'm sure there's ways, but I'm saying, like, I just know I couldn't imagine being so, like, the way my life is right now 4 years ago, I would have never imagined because of how it's like without knowing and learning so much, I don't know if I could let go because it's all in the back of my head now, all this time spent being very, I guess, knowing all the ins and outs. Now it's easy and it's second nature, but how do you,
I think you can purposely teach intuitive eating because I think the thing we have to realize is that the intuitive eating data has all been interventions for people who are overweight, So like, that tells you something right there. The fact that we have such high obesity rates and a lot of people are overweight is that intuitive eating doesn't, or rather just doing whatever the hell you want, I should say, which is not intuitive eating, doesn't work well in an obesogenic environment, meaning foods are highly palatable. Yeah. You always have access to it. It can be extremely calorie dense. We eat for social reasons, hedonistic reasons, and rarely because of satiety and hunger. And we don't have to move very much. Combine that with someone who is emotionally stressed, has certain predispositions towards obesity, whether they're epigenetic or otherwise or whatever, and you get someone who's pretty damn heavy and never really tried to be, Yeah. Obviously, most people don't try to be obese, but however, that's not intuitive eating. That's just kind of what our modern world has resulted in. Mm-hmm. But if you teach them all of those things and teach them about mindfulness and give them some basic information about healthy foods and help them learn to cook and enjoy that stuff, manage their time better, manage their emotions better, teach them things like acceptance-based dieting, where it's just understanding that if you have better self-esteem and therefore you value your health, and making these choices is something that is more valuable to you than being acutely pleasured by eating. And then you also teach them how to be better in tune with their sensations and feelings of fullness and hunger. Then, without ever having gone through that tracking period, a lot of things improve. And there's even some trials where they actually do lose weight, even though they're not trying to. So,
and I guess the thing,
different goals, different background.
Yeah, that you brought up is a lot of the research is in obese people. And it's like at no time, though, would any of us, if we stopped tracking, just get obese. Like whether or not we tracked or didn't or had to do all that. Like I said, getting from here to there would be hard, but actually it wouldn't. It's just that I cared about looking a certain way. And that's why it had to get hard.
But what about this, though? How many times do we know people who only know really one way to diet, and the way they deal with too much off-season weight gain is another prep?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all the time, right?
All the time.
So I think if they did actually just not compete, they'd have to figure out another way, which would be a good experience. But I think that can be facilitated. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So we're spending a lot of time on this.
Sorry.
It's important.
It is.
No, it's good.
It's a huge deal.
So yeah, I think it's a tough one. I think someone in the intuitive eating crowd would be like, they would see weighing and tracking as antithetical or like mutually exclusive or even dichotomous to intuitive eating. But I think
if you track, you're a slave, basically.
Yeah. I think in our community, we've actually seen tracking as being facilitative of intuitive eating for the goal of bodybuilding, like in that specific context. Yeah. Which is just quite different. But there's even studies. There's a specific study called, I think, Learning to Eat Again. And I can't remember the rest of the title, but it's an interview with a bunch of female ex-collegiate athletes. So They competed in college and sport, managed their nutritional intake, ate for performance and nutrition, and then felt very stressed out by that. And then when they retired, they eventually felt a sense of freedom, but they expressed that they had to learn to eat again instead of going by numbers and rules based on athletic performance. Which I think very much mirrors the same experience I had finishing my 2011 season after tracking since 2007. And in mid 2012, moving to New Zealand and deciding I'm going to stop tracking after 5 years of doing it. I literally had to learn to eat again based on hunger signals and satiety. But when I did, it was even better than before. So, yeah, interesting stuff.
Bert, where's Elmo?
Yeah, that's. We're not moving on, bro. You got to do it. Just suck it up.
Well, last thing.
No.
Damn it! The third dodge.
It'll get thrown in.
Okay.
Right,
Let's hear it.
Okay. It'll get thrown. It'll make it on this podcast.
Right.
I promise.
Okay.
Listeners, so don't.
She's not reading the next question. I just want you to know that.
I'll read it in the Elmo voice. You can send it to me.
Peer pressure.
No, remember we used to make fun of the menu dieters, and it's kind of the same thing with the macronators. It's like, hey, if you give this person these 3 numbers, like they're going to lose weight. So it's like a very simple solution to a very complex situation. So sometimes when people will ask, especially when I'm dieting, because I'll throw in snippets of what I'm eating. So you're in, because I don't identify with that camp anymore, the IFYMer, right? I'm like, no, I'm not an IFYMer. I consider myself an educated dieter, both in regards to nutrition and in regards to myself and how these things apply depending on like what I want right now. So I like that term a lot more. Your goal is to be just that, an educated dieter.
Man, because you said it, everyone's going to use it now. Because you're such a trendsetter, Bert.
Put that on a t-shirt.
Well, what does Elmo have to say about it, though?
Elmo like macros.
Hey there, dear listeners. The 3DMJ coaches have just booked our flights and scheduled our next filming session of Lifting Library Editions, and we cannot wait to share them with you. The Lifting Library is our all-in-one video course solution to perfecting the essential movements and exercises that every bodybuilder needs to know and execute well. Once you buy this thing, you have lifetime access to the course, which will increase in size, quality, and price year after year as it grows. We have invested a lot of time in this because we see it as something that is a very, very long-term and ever-evolving resource. So as of now, there are 12 chapters in this course. It's only $49, and that is the lowest price it'll ever be. These are extremely high-quality video tutorials, key performance strategies for executing the lifts correctly, and most importantly, detailed programming considerations that will tell you exactly how and why you should include or not include certain movements into your training program. So go to liftinglibrary.com, sign yourself up now for lifetime access, and every few months you'll be notified of when you have new content in your course so you can log back in and build upon your training education for many years to come. Again, that's liftinglibrary.com. Go there and sign yourself up for the free trial today.
Okay, next question.
I know. Now we can move on.
We do not endorse Elmo's views. He's stuck in 2010.
Okay, this is from Jai, Jye. I think that's how you'd say it. Yeah. Jai is super busy. He works casually, but a work week can be anywhere from 2 to 5 days. When he's working 5 days a week, he'll quite often be in the sun for up to 8 hours or more doing physically taxing work, and that often involves lifting heavy objects. I think that normally, I'm saying this, I think normally he has like a 5-day week training split. Or, I'm making that up. His question is, when he has a full 5-day week that's physically taxing every day at work, how beneficial is it for him to push himself to go to the gym?
Good question. So I really like the idea of having slots. And those don't have to be the same slots each week. So let's...
With an O. not a U. That was good. It was. I almost heard a U. So
That's.
never mind.
I did not say that.
I heard two O's. I heard two O's.
Sleuths.
You
The
heard
sleuths.
sleuth.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
I want to get back to answering the question.
All right.
You two
All right.
dirty people. So slots, I think, are important in the week, where they're not always the same. So let's say you have an upper lower split, right? We're just going to use an example of an upper day that is high reps, an upper day that's low reps, lower day that's high reps, lower day that's low reps, right? And you do them in order within each one of those slots. And you can have 5 slots in a week. You can have 2 slots in a week. And that might be exactly what you do on a week where you train 5 times.
I can't stop hearing sleuths, and neither can Bert.
Spaces.
Bert can have 5 sleuths every week if you want.
Do I need to get a synonym for slots?
Designated training times.
Yeah, that's like 5 words. Come on.
It's better than 5 sleuths.
So you. All right. On weeks where you go to work in the sun 5 days, you have 2 designated training times, and then you have. God damn it! So you train on off days from work. That's all you do, and you just do them in order, and that solves your problem instead of going right. I have a fixed 4 or 5 day schedule. And I think that will much better adapt to your situation. And I have done similar things like that when I was collecting data that was too much to be training on those days.
Yeah, so like I have day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and sometimes those all fit in a week, but maybe because I work a shit ton this particular week, I do day 1 and 2 this week, day 3 and 4 next week. And then week 3 I don't work, so I can do 1, 2, 3, and 4 all together. Not together, but spread out.
Yeah, you could even do 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 if you feel great that week. You recover well, and you have not a single day working.
Okay.
I have a guy that I'm actually doing this with. He has 1 week we can go in 3 times, and we're still playing around with what he can do more when it's a heavy work week. So we don't know if it's going to be heavy work. We don't know if it's going to be volume work. Yeah. But you have to work around it.
Yeah, it's amazing what happens mentally when you say this is cycle 1, cycle 2 instead of week 1, week 2 of training. Like freedom just like opens up. I think so.
I'm
for
a big
a lot
fan
of
of
people. Yeah. So instead of this is my Monday day, this is day 1, and then it can happen anytime.
Loading off days, big thing I'm a fan of for facilitated recovery.
Did you say loading off days?
Man, why can't I speak English with you people? I swear to God.
I wasn't even being dirty about
Listen,
loading
I'm just loading
anything.
on sluts on my off days, apparently. Okay.
That is not even what I said.
Look, I'm just slut loading over here, okay?
Okay, we'll tell
No,
Bob.
I said floating off days.
Okay. Floating off days, so they can happen whenever they do.
In any slut that I want on the week. Yeah.
I'm so confused if you want to be funny or to be serious.
That time I definitely said slut.
Okay.
But it's concerning to me that you couldn't tell the difference. Like maybe I've said slut accidentally to a lot of people in my life. I don't understand.
Bert was laughing too
when I was
from the
in Vegas,
get-go.
did they give me that weird look because I said I'm going to go play the sluts or something like that? I
don't think in Vegas they're interchangeable, really.
Yeah, in Vegas they wouldn't care. Yeah, exactly.
It's the only place either word works. All right. Our friend Alex has 3 different questions, and they're all really good and really long, but I'm going to try to paraphrase. Okay. In short, and way shorter than he asked, but we appreciate the context. Alex, for just so you know, we did go over these questions beforehand, so we all know the context. We're just not going to say the whole thing. I'm not going to do a monologue on the podcast right now, even though I do often. Okay, so are novice gains primarily neural or muscular, or a combination of both, and how does that affect your dietary intake, or can you manipulate your dietary intake to affect your newbie gains and all that stuff? So I think what he's saying is he's heard us talk a lot about newbie gains and how most of that is neuromuscular at first. But he's saying if that is so, do we even need to worry about really pushing the diet, or is stuff going to happen anyways?
It's a good question.
Okay.
So yeah, if someone is a newbie, they're going to gain everything fast. But if you were in a calorie deficit and you started doing resistance training, hell, if you were eating nothing and started resistance training, you would get stronger purely from neuromuscular adaptations and just getting better at the movements. So no, you don't need to feed that portion of your newbie gains. However, you're also going to gain muscle at a faster rate than any other point in your career when you first start lifting. And that does contribute, just not as much. And actually at that point, literally independently from the neuromuscular adaptations, because there's simple things like rate coding, greater neural drive, different inter and intramuscular coordination things that go on that are, unrelated to any kind of accretion of contractile protein. So yeah, you don't need to feed that, but it would be a good idea to feed your newbie gains and not be in a massive deficit, or the example I gave of eating nothing, because you will gain muscle faster. And that means that you can get away with a higher surplus and a faster rate of weight gain with a higher, with less fear of body fat gain. Yeah. But that said, you also don't have to, because the drive is so powerful initially to put on muscle that you will recomp almost at the same speed as if you were intentionally bulking. And we have a ton of research showing that, if you take obese people, put them on a diet and give them resistance training, they're going to both lose fat and gain muscle quite robustly. Or that if you do nothing with someone's nutrition and just have them train, they will gain either body weight and lean body mass while body fat percentage stays neutral, or they will actually go down in body fat while going up in muscle mass and having a relatively neutral weight, or even seeing it go down with muscle. So yeah.
It's a beautiful time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I would advise, unless you are already higher in body fat, or someone who's like with obesity, to actually feed that period reasonably, like at least a 100 or 200 calorie surplus.
And if you don't track, most of the time, if you just train more, you'll just eat more because you'll be hungrier.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
People
Going back to tying it into our
works.
previous question. Yeah. If you just think about maintaining a high protein diet and do nothing else, and you start training a lot, you will probably gain weight.
Good
and when
weight.
you stop gaining weight, you'll gain good weight. You won't see any negative effect on your body comp. And when you stop gaining weight, that's probably not indicative of, now you got a bulk. It might just be indicative that you've kind of finished your newbie gains out. That happened to me in like year 1.5 years into my training. I got up from like 175 to 195, and then I started aggressively bulking to put on more weight, and that really just got me fat.
Yeah, tracking can bite you in the ass that way, huh?
Yes.
When you forget what full is like.
Yeah.
All right.
One thing to make note of is most people who listen to this podcast, because people tend to mislabel themselves in regards to what stage they are. Like, we all want to be a little bit more optimistic than, they're like, I've been training for 7 years and haven't seen great results. I think I'm an early intermediate. Sometimes you hear noob and it's like, no, you're not a noob. So that's just how it is. There was this kid at USAPL Nationals. His name is Ashton Ruska.
Not an intermediate.
Total monster. He looked the same when he was 16 or 17 at the first Nationals I saw. And it's like, dude, this is like your early intermediate phase, like for this kid. And mind you, he's added hundreds and hundreds of pounds to his total, but he looked relatively the same from a muscular standpoint. And he had a stash, a very advanced stash at the time. But yeah, so like that noob thing, most of us who got to this point who are here listening to us, that's probably not you. I like to think at least like mid-level intermediates. Yeah, like I'm less jacked than Ashton was as like a early intermediate, like here going on my 2 decades of training, and that's just kind of how it is. So feed it accordingly.
It's relative to you, not other people.
Yeah.
Well, and like the whole idea of like really eating to drive hypertrophy isn't typically needed until about when, in y'all's opinion? What do you think?
To be honest, it's like it's effective early on, but not necessary because, like you said, typically, unless you're holding back, you will eat appropriate to the stimulus and the energy expenditure to gain, especially if you start lean.
Like Berto's scenario is pretty uncommon, like where Berto is now, where he's like force feeding to gain.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wouldn't even say because he's like the rate of weight gain that he's having now, or the rate of weight gain that I had when I was bulking from late 2016 until like March
Ago.
of this year. Yeah, was it's like a pound a month, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yours didn't. I guess it sounds like, and I could be wrong. It sounds like Berto has to put a lot more effort into his bulking than you. And then
I'm a little bit more. I think two things. I'm a little bit more weight gain resistant, and then also a lot of the good habits that I have developed that help out during a prep kind of come back and bite me in the butt right now because like I know when I'm full, like I know when I'm not hungry. I know not to eat out of boredom, and sometimes you have to at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you have to live two different lives. Damn it! Like in season and like.
If you're an athlete that kind of hovers in both extremes.
Yeah. It's definitely, I had to push hard to get it over 100. It's like 102. That was always choosing the tastiest thing on the menu for the most part, and having a menu when I eat most of the time. It was a very cost ineffective way of bulking because it required me to probably only eat at home like 3 times per week, and I mean that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like that was like a $20,000 year and a half bulk for no reason, you know. Like I could have cooked at home, but it was just too much pain in the ass. So pizza.
Okay, so pizza. Hey, you guys. Oh, you don't have hot and ready's in New Zealand.
I'm hot and ready.
I hope all the salutes heard that. Okay. Okay, question 2. Because of AO and other things, I can't say AO the way you do, Eric.
AO!
There you go. Because of that, Alex has recently been exposed to the idea that progressive overload is not necessarily the driver of strength training adaptations, but rather their results, and that I should not get too hung up if my actual training progress doesn't always match my intended progression scheme.
That's mostly right. So progressive overload does drive adaptation, but you being stronger is not necessarily what's driving hypertrophy. Having more muscle size should eventually result in being stronger. However, because there is fatigue from training, you may not always be able to see that strength gain on a regular basis.
Okay. Can I finish the...
Yeah.
I didn't finish...
Sorry.
No. I thought I was done, but I realized that maybe I should read more. I don't know. Okay.
Can I finish?
Okay. The last question, the last sentence is, how do I know where the acceptable middle ground lies, i.e., how much room to give myself when training progress starts slowing down compared to projected progress?
Yeah, this is a tough one. How do I know if I'm plateaued or am I just have a unreal... Plateaued? Did I say it weird?
Is that a New Zealand thing? Or did you get, like, plateaued?
So I've been in Finland for a week. The week before that,
I was
awesome. In the UK. And now I live in New Zealand, so I don't know how to talk anymore.
I know, I'm so American Texan, like, unaware of everything. So it just made me
all right, y'all, now listen. I don't know if you're stuck. If you're stuck, can't lift heavier, or you just don't try to go too fast.
I know exactly what you said, Ricky Bobby. I got it.
Someone out there relates to it. Got it.
I got it now. Thank you for clearing that up with your plateaus.
So yeah, the question is am I actually stuck, or am I trying to progress faster than is realistic? And that's actually a tough one. And I remember the first time that really smacked me in the face was sometime around the 1 to 2 year mark, where I was literally expecting when I would repeat last week's previous workout this week, I should be able to do more reps or more load. And when that no longer happened, I just thought I was plateaued. But that I didn't realize it just wasn't a realistic expectation. So there's no real way to know what's realistic until you try it out. So you could try Like right now, if you are not making progress every 4-week mesocycle to 4-week mesocycle, you could keep everything the same and then just try to slow down your rate of progression so that happens every 8 weeks. And if you do progress, there's your answer. But it could also be that you are actually plateaued, but there's no real way to know. You just kind of have to do something relative to where you were.
Okay, and this is where testing for bodybuilders can sometimes be useful. Not always
Yeah,
necessary, but
and you don't have to test. So you can start tracking RPE, and you can start doing some low rep kind of finger on the temperature of your program stuff. Like you could do a single on your squats at 8 RPE before you do your back off work. And if that load is going up but the RPE stays the same, or the RPE goes down slightly at the same load, that's a pretty good indicator, especially when you get decent with RPE, that your 1RM is clustering upwards, you know? And that way you don't necessarily have to, test. And that doesn't have to be a single. That could
that's
be
what like testing didn't necessarily mean 1RM. Is not what I
right.
meant, but like
I would say anything that is the equivalent to a 5RM or heavier. So that could be a triple at 8 RPE.
yeah.
And then estimate a 1RM from there, or just figure out what your 5RM would be and whether that's improving or not, but not actually having to do a 5 rep max for sure.
Yeah. Alberto, what do you think about all this? What does Alma think?
No, I agree. I agree. And especially the longer you do this, the more you're going to have to just repeat things and things just get crispier. Even with the big compounds, like sometimes it's like I'll scratch at its progress if it's the same loads, but I don't feel like absolute death relative to last time. And even more so with isolation work. Sometimes I'll just, for example, with lateral raises, I'll just commit to the same weight for like weeks and weeks and weeks. And then, eventually when it's like, oh, okay, it starts off with like, I'm able to generate more localized pain in that muscle. That's a good thing. It means I'm distributing the load how I want. And that means you have the progress and at the end, like I'm finishing on lateral raises with like 4 reps left in reserve with the same sequence. So it's a great skill to have, I feel. I think sometimes we think powerlifter when we think that, but it's very useful, I think, with consistent bodybuilding training, like past year, like 4 even.
Well, and also like knowing when you enter the gym if this is going to be a good or bad day. Like if you know when you walk in, y'all are probably the same thing. Like you wake up, you're on the way to the gym, you feel good, you know this is going to be a good day, and it is a good day. That's cool, but it's like I feel like when you walk in, you know it's going to be, and it's a shit day. Then you know, like, oh, this might be, this might be it. And if that happens like a few times in a row where you're expecting good things and then it doesn't work out, is when you know, like, oh, some shit's got to change. Or at least that's when a way that I tell.
I know about how social like I am when I walk in. Like it usually, but when it's one of those days, I'm like, it's gonna take a little bit longer to warm up. It's not your day,
Yeah.
So sometimes shit just happens too. That's something you have to get used to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if it one time, not a huge deal, but if it's like a repeated thing, like, oh man, this whole 2 weeks, every time I think it's gonna work out, it doesn't. I can't perform the way I'm supposed to, or the way I'm used to. Yes.
Yeah, I would say like if more than like 30% of the time it's not going as expected, something should probably change. But don't be the person who's like, oh my God, I wasn't as strong today. I need to call my coach on their cell phone at 2 a.m. or something like that.
Yeah, but I think with everything, like it's trends. It's trends. It's
yes,
not any particular workout or particular number or particular percentage. Or
100%. Yeah. I agree with that. But it is a really good realization to understand that you meeting a progression is not anywhere close to the biggest piece of the stimulus, right? So inducing overload is what's going to induce adaptation. And the difference between doing 315 for 6 and doing 320 for 6 is so little. And that's like out of your whole leg workout, right? So just as an example, there was some old school techniques that the guys in like the 40s and 50s would do at a certain pretty advanced stage, where they would just keep their reps and their load the same for a whole month and just keep training the same way and just trying to, aggressively accelerate the bar and lift weights. And once it started to feel easier, once that month was over, they would go up in weight, right? So I'm not saying that's optimal necessarily. I would, I'm not saying everything should just stay exactly the same. But that just goes to show you that, like, when you're only able to increase your strength by 1%, being at 99% of your max strength is still stimulating for sure. It's going to generate overload. And it's not the fact that your body has some counter that's like, nah, you did 320 last week, got to do 325 this time, or I will not adapt. That's not how it works. So that is a very important realization.
Yeah. What's it? The last podcast we did that would have come out before this would actually help with that, with Brian Miner and your rep load zones.
That's a good one.
It's interesting.
Yeah, Brian said it really well, that strength is the result of progressive overload, not the cause. Like your ability to add load to the bar. Yeah, your ability to add load to the bar, thank you, Brian Miner, is a result of adaptation, not the only thing stimulating it.
Boom shakalaka. Okay.
Yes, just like NBA Jam.
Oh my God, he's on fire. Is that one right?
He's heating up.
Oh.
Yeah, he's on fire, and then boom shakalaka.
Are you impressed that I knew that? That's the only reference I've gotten in a long time. Super Nintendo.
And boom goes the dynamite.
Oh,
they need to redo that video game.
They have.
But it's more fun in 2D, I
mean, I don't know if it's as good or exactly the same, but I've seen newer versions of it. I could be wrong. That's the kids.
That pretty much, I feel like that handled his other question too. I think we did a good job of combining his two questions. Okay, last one. It's from Noah over on the IGs. All right. I've heard you all talk before about the idea of having momentum during gaining phases and how mini cuts can disrupt this momentum. While this makes sense intuitively to me, I was wondering if you could get more into that idea and discuss the physiological processes that back up that idea. Thank you. How mini cuts can break up the momentum. What do we mean by momentum? Berto, I'm asking you.
You want that or you want me to handle it?
Hit him up with the physiology and then we'll get into the practical.
Okay, there's no physiology. This is just us talking qualitatively.
We made it up. I'm just kidding.
I mean, if you're in a groove making strength gains, focused, putting that on, and all of a sudden you kind of go, oh, maybe I'm getting too fat, and then you do a deload, it's just an interruption. I think it is much more the psychological momentum that we're referring to, and saying, hey, when the going is good, don't take one of the pieces to the puzzle out. If you're making great strength gains and things are going really well, ride that wave.
It's more like just a waste of time kind of thing. Like we say, losing momentum, it's more like you could have been gaining for 8 more weeks and feeling great and this stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I think
talk about the insulin resistance thing, because that's something that people will bring up. That once I get to the 15, it's like everything just.
It's because they need more cinnamon.
All I'm putting on is fat.
The funny thing is, I got an email from over ResearchGate from a medical doctor, or maybe a medical student, not sure. But anyway, someone intimately familiar with the research on insulin resistance. And he could not understand why bodybuilders are always talking about insulin resistance, because it's rare and only in some obese people, who do not exercise, have no intention to be lean, and he just can't believe how bodybuilders are so focused on like, oh, should I have 200 grams or 300 grams because of my insulin sensitivity? And he's right. Outside of clinical issues that are outside of the norm, there's zero reason why you would not be quite insulin sensitive. And that's probably not the modifying factor for whether or not you are having trouble getting lean or not, or whether you should have high or low carbs. And that's even true in the off season. I just don't think that's a thing. So.
Yeah. So no, we when we say momentum, we don't mean like your body slowing down, right? Because I guess something good to touch on would be the difference between a mini cut and a prep. In the prep, we mean that big time. right? That ruins a lot of things, but a true mini cut shouldn't really ding you that bad. It might be a little ding versus like, you busted a hole in your long-term career progress, like a prep would.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, I also struggle with the concept of like anabolic resistance. And in the way it's presented sometimes, the idea that you can't just sustain a calorie surplus feeding muscle growth. You have to switch it up, go on a diet, and then come back to keep growing. I think practically that stems from people just expecting to grow muscle faster, finding that they're gained a lot of body fat, getting to a point where they only notice the body fat, and then going, I need to do a mini cut. It cleans up, and then they notice that they gain better for a while, and it's just really their perception.
Visual.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, gaining weight when you're going from 15 to 20% body fat never looks as good as when you're going from 10 to 15%. So I don't think that's actually an actual outcome, because we have no data to suggest that a male at 20% body fat has some worse like P ratio or something like that. So all the data on quote unquote P ratios, or the idea that the fatter you get, the more likely you are to gain fat, is not even done people lifting weights. So that's really completely unrelated to bodybuilding. And I've seen no data to suggest that weight gain at moderate body fat percentages until you're actually overweight or obese is inhibitory towards like muscle gain. So you have to be pretty damn overweight and obese. And then even I think weight training would drastically change the insulin sensitivity and like the actual muscle cells to where you'd probably still be able to gain muscle mass. Or we just wouldn't see people like Ray Williams around.
Shoot, if you follow Ray, he's always talking about when he like does his his accessory work, he's like stupid pump, and he's proud of his pump. So Ray Williams still gets some crazy pumps.
Yep.
Even though he's a big boy.
Not to mention
15% body fat.
Yeah, and if you want to know what studies we've used to figure out what's the most lean body mass that any human on the planet's carry, it's not on Mr. Olympia. It's on sumo wrestlers.
Ooh.
So there you go.
Man, great springboard question, Noah. That took us a few places. Keep going. Where else can we go, Bert?
Well, here's the dealio. Is like the longer you train, the more you're going to need the longer you're going to need to spend time gaining in order to see a difference. Maybe when you started, you could have 5-6 months, you cut down and you're a new person. That might not work after a while. Like I feel that I would need a full year at this point in order to just psychologically in my own head think like, that was worth it. 6 months, I don't think I'd get the muscle that I recovered from my last prep.
And then when you're tired, you lose it again. Yeah.
Maybe a little dot more, and that's it. So that's another thing. Is the longer you do this, and here's the thing: like the longer you do this, the better you should be as an educated dieter. So you should be able to drag out your gaining phases a bit longer. Should be able to stay relatively leaner, or be able to pace your gaining so that you're not gaining 5 pounds in a month and then having to go back and undo that.
Yeah, I just I know we've done a podcast so many times, we've talked about it a lot, but my perception on the social media is that it's an overused tool when people just need to chill for a year or two, or 3 or 4.
Yeah, and you can tell in their language too. Like I will always say, like at a maximum, do a mini cut for one, like every 4 times the amount of time spent in a surplus should be spent in a mini cut. And what it turns into, people repeat what I say is, so 1/4 of my time should be spent mini cut. Like no, that's the most frequent you should ever do it. Not my recommendation. So yeah.
Good point.
So people hear what they already want to do.
Yeah. Okay. We did it.
Yay.
Elmo
say
say
goodbye, Elmo. Elmo, you got to say goodbye.
Please.
Elmo at the book.
Hey everybody, it's Eric Helms. Thanks for tuning into our podcast. As you know, at 3DMJ we promote evidence-based approaches to the lifting community. If that's something you want to dive deeper into, I'd encourage you to check out my research review, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport, or for short, MASS. This is a review that myself, Dr. Mike Zerdos, and Greg Knuckles put out every month. We cover the latest research publications that are applicable to strength and physique athletes, or anyone who's looking to get stronger or improve their body comp. Our content is in both written and video format. For more information on how to subscribe, check out 3dmusclejourney.com/mass. That's 3dmusclejourney.com/MASS for further details. Thanks for tuning in.